I remember the exact moment when I realized my life was in danger. For weeks it had been building up and suddenly I was sitting there and it dawned on me. If I didn't take drastic measures to ensure my safety, I would lose my life. Never in a million years did I think I'd only get to live for 18 years. There was still so much I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I'd barely even kissed a boy and I hadn't even gone to college yet. This couldn't be happening. And it's not like I had the most carefree life. For one, I'd never met my mom. She died while giving birth to me, and I felt like I must be this constant reminder for my dad that I'm the reason Mom died. I know these things happen, but I couldn't help feeling responsible. So when my 18th birthday was approaching, I decided to pace carefully. Every birthday I had was bittersweet. I always had cake and presents, but at the same time, we always visited Mom's grave and took her flowers. She died so I could be born. Honestly, it's the biggest burden I'll ever carry. Turning 18 felt like a big deal because that was the age my mom died. Yep, she fell pregnant very young and her death was so tragic. I knew this birthday would be particularly difficult for my dad, so I didn't even mention it. He asked me how I wanted to celebrate and I said I was happy to just go out for dinner or something. Pretty quickly, my dad started acting kind of strange. He's always been a quiet, reserved type of guy, but this was next level. I came home from school one day and found him sitting on my bedroom floor, holding some of my old teddy bears, crying. I was so shocked. I saw my dad cry often, but this was different. He looked really sad. I went over to him to ask what was wrong, and he pulled me onto the ground and he wouldn't stop hugging me. That was just the beginning. Throughout the next couple of weeks, he wouldn't leave me alone. He was so clingy. It actually got a bit much at one point when he wouldn't even let me walk to school by myself. He insisted on walking with me, and he even tried to hold my hand when we were crossing the road. I pushed his hand away and said, "Dad, stop it! I'm almost 18. I'm not a kid. I can cross the road by myself." He looked taken aback after I shouted at him, and he apologized and walked away. There was a lot of traffic, but I could have sworn I heard him say something like, "That's the problem. You're almost 18. I was feeling tired, so I started walking upstairs towards my room. It was so hot, so I opened my window and flopped down on my bed. I could hear my dad and my cousin outside talking, but I wasn't really paying attention. Suddenly, I heard my name and my ears perked up. "Listen, you really need to tell her. Oralee is turning 18 this week. She has a right to know. I mean, when was the last time any female in this family made it past 18? It's like a curse, Uncle James." Curse? What was my cousin talking about? What did I have a right to know? I ran downstairs as fast as I could, but my cousin was already in his car driving off. I screamed his name, but he just waved and then was gone. As I turned around, my dad was standing in the doorway. "Dad, what's going on? Is this why you've been acting so weird? Am I about to die or something?" "Oralee, no, don't be stupid. Your cousin has clearly been watching too many movies. It's just a coincidence that your mom, my sister, and your cousin all died at the same age, but what do you mean, your sister?" I was too quick for him. And that's how I found out that my dad had a sister who drowned when she was 18. I had never even heard of her before. No wonder my dad was so emotional about me turning 18. He'd lost his wife and his sister at that age. It was crazy. It felt like something out of a movie, a family curse. And then my cousin, she died last year in a car crash and she'd been 18 too. That night, I didn't sleep much. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I couldn't remember the last time a woman in our family had lived past the age of 18. How had I not thought of this before? This whole time I'd been excited to turn 18 because I'd go off to college. But how would I even make it to college? What if I died tomorrow? My mom died giving birth, my aunt died drowning, and my cousin died in a car crash. Well, I could definitely avoid swimming, and I didn't own a car, and there was no chance I was about to have a baby. But I could die just walking down the street. I was turning 18 a day later. That meant I had 24 hours to do all the things I wanted to do. But what if I died doing them? No, I couldn't even risk it. I spent the last day of being 17 curled up in bed watching movies. I didn't even want to eat in case I choked and died. My dad kept asking me to at least join him downstairs. But what if I fell down the stairs and then... No, but there was one thing I knew I couldn't skip. It was our tradition after all. Dad was watching TV and I crept behind him and went out to the garden to pick some flowers. Mom always loved tulips and we had them in every color. I came back inside and tapped Dad on the shoulder. He turned around and I thought he would cry from happiness. Come on, Dad, you didn't think I'd forgotten, did you? We drove to the cemetery and it was pitch black. We left home late, to be honest, but better late than never. We made our way across the path towards Mom's grave. It was too dark, so I ran back to the car to get Dad's flashlight. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath me, and if it hadn't been for a nearby gravestone, which I quickly grabbed onto, I'd have fallen about 3 meters into a freshly dug hole. I got such a fright, I just started screaming. Dad came running and saw me standing an inch from the hole. Luckily, Dad had already put the tulips by Mom's grave because I wasn't about to spend a second longer than I needed to in that place. On the way home, I sat there shaking. We didn't speak a word to each other. As we pulled up into the driveway, I slammed the door and turned to Dad and said, "See? It is a curse. I could have died back there." I was shaking as I walked carefully to my room. I decided it was no longer safe out there. I couldn't die. I was too young. I locked myself in my room, and I made a promise to myself not to leave it again. I'd pretty much almost fallen into an open grave. The curse was real. Dad eventually gave up trying to get me to go anywhere. Summer vacation had arrived and I was adamant that I would not leave my room. There were dangers everywhere. I could get stung by a killer bee or slip in the shower. After weeks of not going outside, I started to feel really weak. One day, my friends came over with a picnic and tried to get me to go outside, but I refused. They ate their picnic on my bedroom floor while I sat in bed and ate some leftover soup. After they went home, I felt relieved. Who knew what bug they might have brought into my room? But that night, I started to feel really sick. I woke up and there was sweat pouring down my back. My skin felt clammy and hot, and suddenly I had to run to the bathroom. The whole time I was running there, I kept thinking, what if I fall and hurt myself? It was only when I was throwing up into the toilet that the realization washed over me. Oh my gosh, I could die from being sick. It kept getting worse, and my dad found me slumped across the bathroom floor and rushed me to the hospital. I had to take a big bucket along as I couldn't stop throwing up. The whole ride there, we were both freaking out. Dad kept apologizing, saying he was sorry, and maybe there really was a curse, which definitely didn't help the matter. We reached the hospital and Dad had to basically pick me up and drag me through the doors. That's how weak I was. Then, to make matters worse, the doctor who had saved my life when Mom died was the one who was on duty, which of course just brought a whole flood of emotions back for my dad. Could this night get any crazier? I think the nurses on duty weren't sure which of us was the sick one. Dad looked just as pale and upset as I did. After some tests, the doctor confirmed that I wasn't dying. I just had a severe case of food poisoning from the soup I'd eaten, and also a bit of malnutrition from staying indoors for so long and refusing to eat properly. You mean I'm not going to die, Doc? What about the curse? At this, the doctor started laughing. Okay, Orly, you need to get some rest, and your old man too. You're both a bit delirious, I think. After a couple of days of rest in the hospital, I was ready to go home. I'd survived. Had I beaten the curse? On the drive home, out of nowhere, Dad just burst out laughing. Orly, I think you actually cursed yourself. How ironic is that? You refused to go outside and you refused to eat the food your friends cooked, and still you got sick. It's all in our heads, I think. Let's just put this all behind us. It's all just coincidence, okay? There's no such thing as curses. And you know what? Dad was right. I'd become so fixated on keeping myself out of danger that I'd actually brought it on myself. It's like I'd drawn this bad energy towards me. Well, this is at least what I try to convince myself with, because honestly, a small part of me still believes that I have avoided a curse rather than it not ever existing. I mean, I did kinda almost die a couple of times. Coincidence? Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm 23 years old now, and sometimes I still fear for my life. Oh, and when it comes to kids of my own, maybe I shouldn't even have any. I mean, what if there was a chance it was real and my daughter would be stuck with a stupid curse, especially after seeing how hard it was for my father to deal with it? No, thank you.
This story began a long time ago, but I'm going to tell you right now about the turning point in it, which still affects the lives of a lot of people. Well, let me just start from the very beginning. My dad has managed to experience a lifelong lasting friendship. He and his best friend, Mr. Bridges, lived on the same street when they were little boys. Then they went to the same school and then to the same college to study law. As a matter of fact, they practically shared their first job, and it was the first time in the company's history when two competing applicants were both offered employment. There was nothing surprising about the fact that both of their weddings happened the same year, and that both families had their children within 6 months of each other. Of course, since Ben and I grew up together, it's no wonder that we happened to fall in love with each other as soon as we turned 16. Everything was totally perfect, and our dads were on top of the world any time they'd start dreaming about their common grandchildren and everything. I'd been dating Ben for more than a year when, as usual, we decided to drop into his house for dinner. But when we opened the front door, we heard his parents arguing really loudly in the kitchen. Neither of them seemed to hear the door opening and closing, because his dad was yelling pretty loudly and his mom was trying to calm him down by trying to shout above him. Anyway, even though I was almost a part of the family, I felt like it would be better if I just went home this time. Imagine my surprise when I got home and witnessed exactly the same situation with my parents screaming and shouting at each other upstairs. So I went to my room, but even before I got there, I came across my dad on the stairs. He looked really mad and asked me where I'd been. I tried to tell him about the fight I'd heard at Ben's place, but strangely, it seemed to me that just mentioning Ben's family drove my dad to a new level of angry. He just refused to listen to me and went downstairs, mumbling curse words or something about his best friend. This was really odd, so I decided to tell Ben about it. It turned out that he had managed to figure out that our dads had just had a really big fight between each other. It was somehow connected to a promotion where they worked. Both of them were applying to it behind each other's backs. How do you like that? And as fate would have it, my dad had gotten promoted. And then Ben's dad figured out what happened and accused him of betrayal. And, well, you know the rest of the story. The next day, Ben was supposed to come and get me because we had planned to go to the beach. But he texted me that he wasn't really feeling good enough for sunbathing. So I decided to go see him to, make sure there was nothing serious going on. I wanted to take my dad's car, and usually he didn't mind at all. But this time he wouldn't let me use it. He said that he didn't want his precious car being parked in the driveway of the Bridges' house. I tried to be sarcastic somehow and said, "Thank God you don't mind if I'm seen at that house." And then he was like, "Actually, I do mind. Don't go anywhere near them and stay home." Come on! This whole situation with the job and the fight with Ben's father just pissed me off. I mean, why on earth should the whole family now have to participate in this stupid drama? I told Dad what I thought, and he just started yelling again. And I yelled at him back, which was definitely not smart of me, because he ended up saying that I was not only grounded from that moment on, but I was also not allowed to see Ben anymore. I furiously went up to my room and locked the door. I was hoping that he wasn't serious, at least about Ben and me. But it turned out I was terribly mistaken. Of course, I rushed to call Ben to tell him everything, and I was crying because the whole situation really upset me. Ben hated to hear me cry. He was ready to beat up anyone who would cause a single tear to run down my face. He tried to calm me down and promised to drive over to my house as soon as he could. I was just staring out my window, as if the closer I looked, the faster Ben would come. But instead of seeing him, about 30 minutes after we talked, I got a text from him. It said that Ben's dad had gotten rushed to the hospital because he had a stroke. I knew I had to be there for him, no matter how hard our dads were fighting. Ben needed me. So I climbed out of my bedroom window and shimmied down the tree nearby. I almost fell out of the tree, by the way. And I took my bike and hurried to the hospital. I didn't know which ward Ben's father was in, but I saw his mom in the hall trying to buy a coffee from the vending machine. So I rushed to her to ask how Mr. Bridges was doing and what had happened. But she wasn't happy to see me. I mean, like, at all. She basically said almost nothing. Like, no hello, no goodbye. And then she literally kicked me out on the street, saying that nobody from her family would be happy to see me right then, and that I'd better stay away from Ben. Everybody around was staring at us, and I felt so offended and embarrassed at the same time that I just started crying again. I tried to call Ben, but there was no service in the hospital, so I had nothing to do but just take my bike and ride it home. I didn't know how to react to everything. I waited the whole day by the phone, hoping that Ben would call me and tell me how his dad was doing. Fortunately, later that evening, he finally called and said his dad was okay. He also told me why he had the stroke. It was a consequence of the fight they got into when Ben tried to leave to go his son. Mr. Bridges was against it. You see, just like my dad-in-law. I also had to tell him what happened between me and his mom in the hospital. And Ben was totally in shock and mad at his mom. But I insisted that he not jump off the deep end. I mean, she was scared for her husband, and to be honest, I could understand her behavior. Ben promised to keep calm and see me in the morning by whatever means possible. And the next morning, we really did manage to see each other in a cafe, and it was there that Ben proposed to me. Well, we had already had a talk about us living together, but that was before the big fight. And since both our dads were now against our relationship, marriage seemed to be the only opportunity to get out from under our parents' influence. Still, we decided to make a final effort to try to make our families bury the hatchet and arranged a table at one of the local restaurants, inviting all of our parents in secret from each other. But I have to say, this did not work. I mean, our dads definitely couldn't fight with each other in public, but the tension between them was unmistakable. We tried to make them start talking, but when they heard that we were going to move to LA to live there together, both of them turned red with anger. Dad said that if I did that, he wouldn't give me any money any longer, and Ben's dad just listened to us carefully and walked away, not saying a word. Here I am now, packing my stuff. I know that my mom's crying in the next room because she also tried to convince my dad to put himself in my shoes, but he wouldn't listen. And Ben and I are getting on a plane to LA tomorrow. I have no idea what my life is going to be like from now on. Oh, yeah. We got married at City Hall about an hour ago.